I think we are good to go ahead and get started. So really quick housekeeping slide here. The agenda is straightforward. So we're going to start with introductions of our speakers for the day, and then we'll dive straight into questions from the audience. Housekeeping notes here, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box at any time, and we'll just address those as we go, as they fit into the flow of the conversation. If you're able to share context on the particulars of your company or the go-to-market structure that you have, that'll be helpful in allowing us to give a response that'll be as relevant as possible. There's an upvote feature to give a vote for questions that you like, so we can make sure we answer the questions that have the most value for the most participants. And then we'll share the recording and summary after the session. So with that, I'll go ahead and dive in here. This is week 4 of 8 of our annual Planning Unplugged series. And today our topic is on product. So product, not in terms of if you're a product manager, but how does the RevOps team collaborate with product teams to do the annual planning things. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and do introductions. We'll have Tyler do his first, and then Bala, and then our guest, Sean Lane, and then we'll dive into questions.
Hello, everybody. Tyler, Head of Customer Success at Fullcast. And I'm just here to maybe just uncover some of the mystery of what that stuff is. And I'll tell a story or two. I don't know. We'll see. And Bala, take it away.
Thanks, Tyler. Bala Bhaskar, co-founder and CTO at Fullcast. Again, happy to be here. Hoping to uncover this topic. I think it'll be an interesting discussion. Sean, over to you.
Yeah, Sean Lane. I'm a founding partner at Minute Light Consulting. We help early stage companies improve their go-to-market execution, and a lot of my background's in RevOps. And so I've been on the other side of this part of the planning process. And so excited to talk about, how decisions get made to even, add new products into the offerings of a team's go-to-market, and also all the ripple effects on teams. And also excited to learn from Bala and Tyler from their experiences.
Awesome, great. So while we're waiting for some questions to come in from the audience, I'll tee up one here for the team that I think will be a good place for us to start. So that one is, when it comes to RevOps supporting GTM planning from the product side, what have you guys seen work well and what have you seen not work well?
The question is, who's going to be the first to jump in on this?
I can start if you want. Well, so I think in terms of product teams, typically what happens is there is some kind of goal or objective that the product team is trying to achieve, right? Either whether it's a P&L goal or some kind of an objective of expanding into a market, or introduction of a new product, introduction of a new motion in terms of how the product is used, or category of people that you're trying to reach. So whatever those goals are, ultimately the product teams will need to coordinate with the distribution engine to make sure that that gets realized. And so this is sort of the discussion, the crux of the topic today is how does that interaction happen, and what are some of the key things to look for there. I think one of the critical things is making sure that you're having this conversation with the product organization as early as you can in the cycle, right? Because these one thing that's thing to note here is that the product organization may not move as fast as you want, and as we are used to in the go-to-market side of things, right? And so even if you wanted a different strategy, or if you wanted additional support documentation from product marketing, or product support, or product management, or if you have suggestions or tweaks that you want to make to the product, pricing, packaging, like all of those things, those things take time, especially if there is an engineering component to it. You can't just move the ship really fast, right? So these conversations, I think it's important that it's happening early in the cycle. So don't wait until October to tell the product team that you need a different pricing mechanism. Not the time to do it. So continue those conversations, I think, throughout the year, so that you're teeing up the product organization to sort of support the motion that you want to go to market with. The other thing that gets forgotten quite a bit in the latter part of the planning cycle is pricing and packaging, right? I mean, pricing and packaging, I think, is a very important aspect of how you take a product into market. And when you're thinking about different segmentations and sales programs and whatnot as part of the go-to-market planning, you need to be able to match that up with the product, the pricing, the packaging, the messaging, and the competitive sort of support that you need from a product standpoint, right? So it's a key aspect, a key pillar of your discussion. And something that I've seen work well is to start those conversations early and carry through that conversation throughout the planning cycle, so you're aligned with the product in terms of what they want to have happen. Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I think your point, Bala, about the timing is a really important one, and not just, I think, in the direction that you described of, hey, ops needs to go to product early and figure this stuff out, but also in the opposite direction, right? If you're there trying to figure out kind of what the next year or the next 6 months or whatever time horizon your company's working on is going to look like, one of the key inputs you're going to need to building out that plan, is going to be, what are the strategic bets from a product perspective that we might be making? And that might mean, to your point, a new product, or might mean new features. Now all of a sudden you might have some upgrade levers or reasons why seat usage might expand or product usage might expand. And you can take those strategic bets or big initiatives that the company is going to make and build those into the plan. And then once you have that input, you can start to think about things like, okay, if this comes true, what are the key assumptions we need to make in the operating plan? And then in order to make those key assumptions come true, what are the teams we need to make those things happen? What are the different roles and responsibilities that maybe we didn't have before this product existed that we need to build into the plan? What are the quotas of those people? What are those people's territories, right? All of a sudden you have a whole bunch of ripple effects coming from that. But I think if you start with going to kind of the product organization or your company's leadership and say, look, like, we need these big bets, we need these strategic initiatives in order to even kickstart our planning process, I think that's a good way to kind of use those inputs to drive the rest of the process. And absent those things, I think it's going to be really difficult to build a plan that takes all those things into consideration. And I also think, to your point about kind of the time horizon that product and engineering teams need to build their products, there also needs to be a level of commitment in kind of this handshake agreement between go-to-market and product to say, we're going to stick with this direction for a little while, right? Because it'll take the product team a while to build something. And if you abandon that direction, or the team makes it partway through it, but then doesn't deliver in time for all those key assumptions we talked about, then you're going to have challenges meeting the plan as well.
For me, it's like, I kind of touched on this, but it's a little bit of the comp design aspect, right? And I typically, what works well and also doesn't work well is how you think about your comp in relation to the actual product. And I mean, a very clear, simplified example of this would just be, we have this new product, we're taking to go to market, and we're like going to do this whole design. This is how we're going to allocate our resources. You need to go through this whole process. And then you kind of think about comp design at the very end of this stage, and really you've maybe just rolled this into just the general quota, and then no one really actually cares about this new product that you're going to be doing, right? And so going back to timing, again, bringing these conversations earlier in and thinking also about, well, how are we going to motivate people to actually sell a specific product, and do we really care about that or not, is going to be really key. So it can work well in the sense if you've really thought about it and you hone in on it, and it also can work not well or not in your favor if you've kind of just said, well, here's your quota, sell a little bit of this and sell a little bit of that. or maybe you miss on the numbers, right? So that's kind of my
I
my
think-
2 cents.
Carrying on that topic, Tyler, is one of the things that's interesting is in today's go-to-market, as product organizations mature, you don't have one sales motion, you don't have one distribution motion, right? You have some aspects or some segments of the market that you want product-led kind of motion when you're reaching out to them. In other cases, you want a more involved enterprise sales team or an outbound motion, whatever the scenario is. There needs to be the support that you need in the product in order to enable those kinds of distribution motions for the different segments that you're dealing with, right? And I think that's important to sort of figure out, as you said, early in the cycle, figure out the compensation model, like simple thing like, okay, if a customer comes in self-serves on a AE's territory, what does that look like in terms of comp, right? And do you incentivize them to do that? How does marketing provide the air cover for a PLG motion in a specific segment versus air cover in an enterprise sales motion that you might have with the product, right? So I think even for a single product kind of organization, you have different go-to-market motions that you're trying to enable throughout the sales process, and that's I think an important thing to figure out, both from an incentive standpoint. How do you incentivize people to do that, and how do you pay them appropriately for the scenarios that you're trying to enable?
I feel like we could go a bunch of different directions on the team structure stuff, but I think at the heart of something you said, Bala, that I think is important about this entire product conversation is every time you add another product or offering, you are complicating that go-to-market, right? You mentioned there's different sales motions there, and then everything else that we're talking about gets a little bit more complicated from a personnel perspective, from a data perspective, from a process perspective. All of a sudden, you have to be able to accommodate multiple funnels or multiple products inside of how you think about your planning, your operations, your systems, whatever. And to think that they're just going to layer in beautifully into all of your existing processes is probably a little bit naive. And so you have to think ahead about not just those comp ripple effects, but also, okay, how do we think about lead delivery differently for this product? How do we think about those cross-sell motions differently? How do we think about customer success, Tyler, differently post-sale? Do we train everybody on every product? Are we going to have specialists and overlays? There's just like a whole bunch of ripple effects you have to consider there.
Right. And I've seen where this gets thrown for a toss very quickly is when you have acquisitions, right? So you have an acquisition, you come in with another set of products. Now you're used to be happy with a single product company, and now all of a sudden you have 3 product lines, and they have different sales motion, different support motions, different lead generation motions. Like, how do you integrate all that into your planning process, right? And especially with M&A, it becomes really complicated really quickly unless you're able to sort of wrangle this discussion across the different stakeholders in the organization. And that's for me anyway, that's always been the challenge doing the job is when something like that happens, the 0 to 100 is really fast, right? And you really have to get a lot of things in motion to be able to deliver a coherent plan at the end of the day.
When you guys have seen scenarios like that, either with your customers or Bala at Salesforce, like what have you found to be kind of the ingredients for how people make a decision about, do we cross-train everybody? Do we end up with specialized teams or overlays? How have you seen people kind of weigh the pros and cons of those types of questions?
Yeah, it's typically, in an M&A situation, what I've seen is the first year, just leave everything be. Just kind of, plan it, but you slowly start to integrate. You don't do this in a hurry, because if you do, it's going to be mass chaos in all the organizations, right? And typically you might implement a lead passing sort of mechanism so that There is common scenarios that the product, obviously, the combination of products would solve. So you want to enable that sort of conversation to have happen. And depending on the size of the organization that you're bringing together, it typically is a couple of years before you sort of start to integrate these things. They tend to stand alone as silos and bring them together. But then from a RevOps perspective, you're probably dealing with more fundamental plumbing problems like, multiple Salesforce instances and different sales motions. Like one's a hunter-farmer, the other one's a territory-based. Like how do you bring these different scenarios together? Eventually you'd have to bring people together. And that's where the idea of specialists overlays. You really kind of have to understand the complexity of the interaction that you're having with the customer for the specific product, and then decide what's the appropriate motion, right?
I'm just going to chime in on that because that's where my head was at, is just the complexity piece. And a lot of times what I feel is the initiator for this, M&A or not, right, is you're hearing from either customers, prospects, or even sales that they just can't cover the entirety of all the products, right? Like you can only get so into the weeds on the details of every single product, and therefore you need to start thinking about overlays or a specialist, or you split, if you've got 10 products and you want to group them together in certain fashions so that you can have sales reps that can get into the weeds and understand how to sell a specific group of products. And so that really is going to come to light through having those conversations with sales leaders, sales reps, understanding how customers felt about the sales process. And that's going to initiate that thought around, well, is this too complex to have one rep sell 10 products? Is our product just really complex? Like if we have just 3 products, is one really, really complex and the other 2 are kind of just, simple, add-ons or, things like, and that's really kind of where you would start that conversation. I think you can always pull data to like back that stuff up. And
I want to share an interesting story about this particular situation that we had. We had the number one product with the company that I was working for. The number one product is actually just known to everybody. All the salespeople know how to sell it. Everybody's very comfortable with it because it's the oldest product that was in the catalog, right? And then the new products that got added, whether through M&A or through new products getting built in the organization, the go-to-market motion was, okay, we're going to add specialists, we're going to add some compensation models, we're going to add some incentive plans to actually help drive these new products. And 2 years in, you look at kind of where the business is going, people have basically forgotten the fundamental product because there was no additional spiff incentives or resources being assigned to it. That you were starting to lose business, market share on the fundamental product because you've sort of forgotten that you got interested in sort of driving the new products and the new motions. And we had this sort of okay, wait a minute, our core market is actually dying because we're not spending enough time pushing that. So you kind of have to Tyler's point, look at that all the time and make sure that your incentives are in the right place.
Yeah, I think regardless of how many products you have or the incentives that you put in place to try and incentivize the right behaviors, a good thing to keep in mind is, people are going to sell the thing that has the path of least resistance, right? And as they should, right? Reps should be able to find the thing that has that path of least resistance, and that's where they're going to go. And so understanding what that path is, I think, is important. I think if people are thinking about, okay, how do I make some of these decisions? There are a few, I think, kind of factors that I would consider when you're thinking about kind of the cross training or overlay, different types of models, right? I think the first is, how technical the different products might be, or whether or not, you need to be super technical in order to effectively articulate the pain point that somebody might have and the solution that you're trying to sell. I think another part of it is the persona that you are typically selling to, right? So if that core product that you're talking about, Bala, has a particular user within the organization, and then that net new product has a completely different person, it might be harder for people to make that jump to understanding what that person's day looks like, what are the challenges that they face in their role, and what are the things that they might need in order to meet those challenges or meet their individual goals. I think if it's the same persona, people tend to like think about, okay, it's really hard for people to grasp all these different products. Like, I think you got to take the kids' gloves off on some of those things and just give them another kind of arrow in their quiver for something that they can sell. They're working with these people anyways. They're talking to them all the time. So if you're building the right types of relationships and understanding their day, give them that other thing that they could potentially sell. And don't be nervous about, I don't know if they can hold these two thoughts in their head at the same time. They absolutely can.
They can.
Right. And so give them the ability to do that. And then to your guys' earlier points, figure out which of those things you want to incentivize more or less or not.
No, the one situation at Salesforce that we were dealing with is, of course, when Marketing Cloud was getting built, it's not even the same person in an organization. That wasn't the conversation. Is it, most of the sales were actually going through agencies. So the agencies were actually doing the buying, which was an entirely different organization from the company that you're trying to sell it to. Right? And so that complicates things. And obviously in those kind of situations, you want a specialist sort of sales organization that knows how to sell to agencies to actually drive the revenue. So that's sort of an extreme example of the point you're making, Sean, is like the sales motion could be entirely different, in which case it requires you to think. But if it's fairly looking the same, then add it to the list, and I think that integration becomes much easier.
We have a question. Do we want to answer it?
Sure.
Let's do it. An AMA, right?
Oh, I'm just kidding. So is there a time you've seen when RevOps was able to provide critical guidance during annual planning to influence a product's go-to-market strategy?
So I think one of the things that I've found to be really helpful here is you have to have the infrastructure set up where you actually understand how your customers are using your different products, right? And so that's a very easy thing to say in one sentence. It's an incredibly hard thing to actually string together and build the instrumentation that you need in order to do that effectively. And so what I mean by that is like things like, if you've got multiple products, how many daily active users do you have for that product? What's the difference between one type of user role and how they would use the product versus another one? Or, what is the end user of your customers, using it? So Drift, we had, our own product, but then we also had the end users of our customers. And so it was a lot about, okay, how many conversations were people having using a particular type of playbook or a particular type of landing page? Or what were the traits of customers that were more likely to be successful with this particular feature? And the reason I say all of that is to basically say, you have to have this data-driven foundation that used to be a lot harder. And now there's a ton of tools available to people to string together all of this different product usage data. And so I would say having that puts you in a position to be able to do what I think, Tyler, you're talking about, is to provide that critical guidance. I think without that, you're going to have a really hard time, right? And so instances where I've been able to provide that guidance is when I've been able to say, look, I've actually found these commonalities between the types of customers who are successful with both products A and B. And, you were able to find some surprising insight that leads us to say, actually, we probably have a ton of white space in terms of our ability to cross-sell product B to customers of product A, given that we've now found these common attributes of customers that like and are successful with both of them. And so having the data available, I think, is the kind of prerequisite to be able to provide insights like that.
Yeah.
So
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to paraphrase or summarize this. But did we do this last time where we talk over each other, or did I know? Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, though, is that take the time to set up the products in your CRM, because I have seen people large companies say, we don't know what was sold really, like product level wise. We know what was sold if I look at the contracts or whatever, but you can't just like report on it. You can't just like go into Salesforce or your CRM tool or your wherever, your data warehouse, and say, this is what people bought. This is what people bought product A. This is what product B, and here are all the customers that have A and B. And so just take the time to do that and do it right, because you'll be able to use it later on.
Better yet is that you want to know what your pipeline looks like during the year for each product, right? So that you can make the necessary changes to sort of support what you need. You're absolutely right, Tyler. I think that's one of the things that even if you have product set up and if you have a CPQ system in place and you've got everything sort of defined, just have the discipline to say by stage 2 or stage 3 in the opportunity, you should have your products built out in your opportunity so we can actually forecast and build pipelines and whatnot. Just that in itself is such a hard thing to do. You got to get that in place for you to have any sort of sense of how to manage this regularly as a go-to-market motion. The other thing where I've seen this guidance actually be super important is in the post-sales kind of motion, right? Which is deployments. How are things happening with the customer? What is the state of the customer deployments? Are they using the telemetry, as you said, Sean, on the product itself? How are they using it? What's the attributes that we're capturing? And what sort of triggers do we have to understand any sort of renewal friction that might be building up, any customer success tickets or issues that haven't been resolved, the general sentiment of the customer? Like, those are super important for how you make money at the end of the day, right? We focus on sort of the selling motion, but really all of that has to fall in place for us to get the full RevOps cycle working. Otherwise, you only solve for half the problem.
And I think you can extend that all the way to the retention of those products, right? And you can figure out, okay, what we've learned about our customers, that the people who are most likely to renew are the ones that are using features A, B, and C. And so now all of a sudden, you have this shared goal between both a customer success organization and a product organization to say, look, we've found that this particular feature, if people use it, the retention rate is, 20% higher than if they don't use it. And so now we, as a post-sale services or CS organization, need to focus on the adoption and usage of this particular feature. But also, as a product team, we need to make it easier for people to discover and use this feature. And then that will actually drive it. And I think giving product teams retention goals that are based off of those feature or product specific inputs is a really great way to keep everybody really close to both the customer as well as to, dollar-based outcomes, right? It can be very easy for a product organization to be far away from things like bookings or retention rates. And I think that's a nice way to keep everybody close to those, the lifeblood of the company.
And taking that to the top of the funnel, your win-loss analysis and any sort of product level detail that you can provide on your win-loss analysis is going to be invaluable to your product management team, right? So which is, why did we lose this deal? Oh, well, we lost this deal because we don't have this capability in the product. Well, that's something that can be recorded and quantified and provided as feedback to the customer. Is it a pricing problem? Is it a competitive problem? Is it a feature gap problem, right? All of that information, if we instrument it correctly, are continuous feedback that you could be giving to the product team so they know how their product is performing in the market, right? And so right throughout the cycle, I think we've talked about like the entire distribution chain here, but right throughout that cycle, I think collecting the right set of data and communicating and providing feedback back and forth, not just from RevOps, but also from the product team to RevOps, that communication channel, I think, is super important.
I think the big thing is just we've already, I think, beat this one up a lot, which is just the data piece, right? Like, that is the biggest thing that RevOps can set up and have ready to go, is just the data that you need to make decisions on how you're going to go to market. And that's that critical guidance piece. And in another example, and this is again very, very simple stuff in terms of examples, but like you could look at specific products and how they performed last year, and you might notice that, you know, product C performed really well in a specific vertical, and that might be the discussion that you need to have around, do we go create a different go-to-market motion or a team to go after this vertical with this product? Do we look at things differently in terms of the whole feature set for this vertical, et cetera? And so those are things that RevOps really helps with, is just get that, the data in order, the ability to get those answers and make decisions on that, which help inform where do resources go, et cetera.
I'm going to throw a question for you guys to see how you might think about this. But what are the data faux pas that you have seen done with products, right? What are the things that as RevOps practitioners we've seen that you know, there is a few, but I want to throw that out to you guys and see what you have.
I've already mentioned one, which is don't set up your products.
Yeah.
So that's my first one that just comes to mind.
Sean,
I think a really big one is staleness, right? And you know, in particular, I think Tyler, you were the one who mentioned before, you know, how do you set up the plumbing such that product usage data is going into Salesforce or going into your CRM? And so what I think about there is, okay, the end users of that data are all of my customer facing team members, right? So if you're, you know, a salesperson in a PLG motion, or you're a customer success person, or you're an account manager going into your renewal, the first thing you're going to do is look at the usage data that's available to you to help prepare you for that conversation. And like, if those pipelines aren't working, or they haven't refreshed in a certain period of time, or some wires got crossed and, you know, one org's data is going to a different account in Salesforce, you've got a duplicate problem, like you have a serious issue, right? And like, I think it's important to recognize that it's not just about the planning process, or it's not just about the ops team being able to run a report. Those internal users who are leveraging that data to do their job, like that's where the problems start, right? And so having ways to proactively alert yourself when either a pipeline is broken or something hasn't been refreshed in the period of time that you would expect it to be refreshed in is, I think, really important. So, you know, that could be something you build yourself where, you know, hey, I know that like when this, you know, pipeline is supposed to run, I'm going to update this field, and that field is going to tell me how frequently it's been refreshed. And I've got reports that tell me the last time that date was refreshed. That would be like a manual way to think about it. But there's also a whole bunch of tools that are available to be able to alert you, and you can build those in when certain pipelines are broken. So I would really think about, for every pipeline you're setting up, just like any process you would set up as an operator, how do you look around corners, anticipate where those pipelines might break, and set up alerts for yourself so you catch it, you know, hours or minutes after it breaks, as opposed to days or weeks.
Yeah. And one thing for me, my pet peeve, something you just touched on, Sean, which is duplicate accounts. So typically when you have a product-led kind of motion, what tends to happen is that the marketing form where they go in and sign up for a trial automatically just creates an account in Salesforce, and you link the resources that you're provisioning to that individual account, which means from a RevOps perspective, now we've got, you know, hundreds of accounts for the same company. And we then have to aggregate all that information somehow and figure it out. But that creates all kinds of problems right throughout, because you can't delete them, because if you delete them, the resources become unusable. And this problem, I don't know how many CRMs I look into and go, wow, this is like a fundamental thing that you should not do, that I see so many people doing. because you didn't have that extra step of checking to see if the account exists in the system before you go create it, right? And Salesforce just makes it so easy for you to just shoot yourself in the foot like that. But that's one situation. And similarly, on the to Tyler's point about adding products, you could go entirely crazy on adding products and just add like a gazillion SKUs into your CPQ system, right? And I've seen that happen as well, where I think this was when I was working at Microsoft. They had TechNet, which is just one product, and they had about 1,000 different combinations of SKUs just for TechNet. Right. And so anytime you needed to make a change to the product, it's a 6-month process, right? To add a SKU or to remove a SKU. So that can go out of control as well. So it's important to sort of make sure that you're planning and also retiring things, because sometimes what happens is you just keep building SKUs. You never retire them. They're sitting in your price list, but you're no longer selling them. But data is getting reported on them. And this is just kind of the regular maintenance that we would always advise. But these are like this explosion of SKUs is another problem where RevOps can't answer a simple question on what was my attrition on this product last year, right? Or what was my growth on this product last year? And because there are so many SKUs, it's really hard to sort of go back and look at data from a historical standpoint, unless you get that right off the bat.
I think, Tyler, I want to make sure you get to ask these questions that people are saying, but just to add on to that last point, Bala, I think like the questions that you were just posing, I think is a really smart way to think about it for ops folks who are listening, right? Like anticipate the types of questions that you are going to want to know the answers to, or that your internal customers are going to want to know the answers to about these products, and then design your infrastructure, your processes, your reporting with those questions in mind, right? There are going to be questions like, how much did this product grow, or what's the retention rate of this product, that 100% people are going to want to know the answer to. And so if you build in a vacuum, not considering the fact that you're going to have to answer those questions, it's really difficult to then build to answer them after the fact. And so having those as almost requirements for, hey, at the end of the day, we have to be able to answer these questions, and we cannot build a system or an infrastructure that does not answer those questions, I think is a good way to go into those processes, so you're not surprised by it, 3 months into the product launch.
The biggest thing, and this is just for solutioning on this, is just like try to avoid having a one-to-one relationship between account and a product, because that's how you end up with 1 million accounts. And we've seen it in many places, and large companies and small companies, especially with the PLG, and that's how you end up with it. So when you think about designing it, like junction objects and a one-to-many type of situation is where your head should be at. Okay, answer live. What best practices have you seen when it comes to getting the kind of collaboration we've been discussing between product teams and RevOps? Besides meetings.
Best practices, keep it to data, talk data. Because there is and there are challenges to this. So I won't oversimplify it to say everything has to be about data, because typically as a product organization, when you are launching a new product, your resources are spent on building the features and capabilities that the product is going to be used, from a usability standpoint, from a customer's perspective. You're not spending a ton of resources on instrumenting your product for RevOps or any sort of ops function, right? That comes later. It's sort of, in terms of you got a limited amount of money to go build a product, you're going to focus on the customer features and not really on the instrumentation and provisionability and all of those things, right? So that's a maturing process, but I think if you can keep the conversations to here are the critical pieces of data that we need as the product matures for us to be able to answer the type of questions that Sean was mentioning, and be upfront and clear about those, so that you can tell the product teams to instrument it in the right places so you can actually measure it, and for RevOps to instrument it in the distribution transaction so that you can actually measure it and provide that feedback, right? There is likely, and we've suffered this internally as we were building the product initially, so either me or somebody in the company will go have a conversation with the customer, and they'll point out one problem. And all of a sudden, that problem becomes the biggest thing we got to go solve, right? And it's not backed up by data; it's anecdotal. There's value to it, but it's also important to sort of validate those things with the right set of data so that you're making the right decisions.
Yeah, I think a few things to add. I mean, first on that very last point you just made, Bala, I mean, I think a perfect example of that is when you think about, feature requests, right?
Yeah.
That you get from folks, or bug fixes requests that you get from folks. And I think very simple things like bringing customer values or spend to those conversations. So you can confidently go to a product leader and say, look, I've got 22 customers across these 3 geos that value X amount of dollars in revenue that are requesting this product. Like, how does this stack up against the requests and the dollar values of customers in other places? Like, that's just one example, I think, of ways you could make what you were just suggesting very real for people. I think another way to kind of keep these teams close is through how you set goals together and having kind of those shared goals, right? I've certainly been guilty of building RevOps goals that are entirely focused on kind of my core internal go-to-market customers, right? So I'm working with sales, I'm working with customer team, I'm working with marketing. And plenty of times I've set goals without the product team involved, right? And so I think doing those goal setting exercises together in a way that is very much inclusive of product and gets their perspective, I think is a really important thing. And then also it aligns you on, the parts of maybe one of those product usage metrics or features that you are going to try to drive together, right? And then again, it keeps them really close to things like pipeline bookings, retention, as opposed to just what they ship. I think another important part of like that goal setting process is then how you execute on the needle that you're trying to move within the product. And I think folks in RevOps are really uniquely positioned to kind of sit at the center of, call it product, customer success, and like customer marketing, right? Because all of a sudden you understand all the data points that we've been talking about, as well as kind of these unique triggers that can be in the product that might then trigger some sort of action. So let's say, a particular usage of a particular feature triggers a new customer marketing campaign or a particular offer for someone, or maybe some sort of enablement or course that might go to that end user based on the action that they took. Every single company right now is saying, look, we're trying to do more with less. And so if you're going to do that, you have to understand ways that you can provide unique value to the user of your product without a human being involved. And so this is a really interesting way to do that. And I think ops folks are uniquely positioned to kind of sit at the center of all those teams. You have to have the data instrument, you have to have the product instrument in all the ways that we talked about. But now all of a sudden, you're not only setting those goals with the product organization, but you're participating together in executing campaigns that are actually going to move the needle on those goals. So I think it's an interesting way for ops folks to kind of expand the way they think about their relationship with a product team.
I have nothing else to add. That was amazing. I just think, I actually really think that was a really good point though, that you had made, Sean, with just thinking about things around, working with product, not just in the sense of like, these are the questions we're trying to answer. And so this is the data that we need to get. And so help us do that. But also, adding, because this is customer success role here, and like thinking about working with product on how we can identify things that happen in the product, in the usage, and then send automated emails, or to your points, trainings and things like that out to those customers are huge, because that is the value that people want to see. And even for like Fullcast, right, as we think about somebody building like a map-based territory, we want to work with the product to figure out, well, how can we identify that and then send this email out that says, well, guess what? You could also do it this way. And here's kind of our best practices around that. And that's only going to come through as we collaborate together on those two things. So
I think there's an internal enablement part of that too, Tyler, right? Where, you know, somebody on your customer success team or somebody on the customer marketing team might not even know that that's possible, right? And so helping people understand internally, this is the data that's available to us, and this is what we could potentially do with it, right? Teaching people like what is possible with some of those types of campaigns is another huge part of it, right? It's not just about executing, it's about letting people know that this is what they could even do within our own product or within our own marketing to meet our customers in a more compelling way.
Yep. We got a couple questions. I'm going to save the PLG thing for last because that's kind of a boulder to move. And so we'll go to this question from Lynn. Do you think that product specific quotas in a rep's commission plan works, or let them sell anything to make their ARR target? And I think we kind of talked a little bit about this at the very beginning, but it was just, you know, for me, I think determining how much you really care about your product and how you want it to, if you really want it to be sold, will determine the commission plan that fits for it. And so what do I mean by that? It's really just, you know, if you have 3 products and maybe the third product C, is brand new, and you really want to see market share increase on that, then that might tell you that you need to set a product specific quota for that rep. But if it's maybe like a simple add-on to product A and product B is just like a kind of take the cake, and you know, you're kind of take it or leave it, it's something that's been established for a really long time, you can just say, hey, sell anything towards this general target. And that's kind of just where I would start. I'm sure you two both have different.
I think for me, there's 2 opposing factors here, 2 opposing sort of pressure points, right? One is as a sales rep, as Sean mentioned earlier, you want the least path of resistance to making your number. So you don't want to have restrictions on you have to make money in this sort of combination of products or these sort of quotas. I don't think I've ever met a sales rep that's happy about those kinds of objectives, right? They want it to be simple. It's like, don't tell me how to make money. I'll go make money selling anything that we have. Just let me go do that, right? The opposing factor there is that the company wants to drive certain businesses, right? So they either a transformation, a new product, or something like that. I think from a RevOps perspective, you need to find that balance. And what I mean by that balance is I've worked in organizations where a sales rep has 9 different product quotas, and that's just way too complex. Nobody knows how that's going to work. And the reps, it take them like a week to understand how to make that. They have to build their own spreadsheets to figure out how much money they're going to make. That's overcomplicating. So you can, with product level quotas, go the wrong distance in that sense. But understanding the company also wants to make directions, right? So some of our customers, for instance, or one of our customers specifically, is looking to go from a hardware-based business to more of software and services. So they're actually trying to orient the business to go a certain direction. And in that sense, they're incentivizing the product direction that they want to go in by setting product level quotas. So in that sense, that makes sense. It's not a complicated sales motion. Everybody understands why you're doing it. So I think that's the balance that you have to achieve between those 2 opposing factors.
Yeah, I think you guys hit on a lot of important parts. I'll add just a couple of things. I think first, reps want to feel as though they have ownership over their path to their number. And so I think the extent to which you can give that to them and say, look, these are all the different ways that you can get there, build your path, right? I think that optimizing for simplicity in that particular question, I think, is an important thing to do. I think a couple other things you could do right, is you could think about what are, I think a good comp plan has different roles that are complements to each other. And what I mean by that, there are different people in the organization that you could incentivize around this new product that aren't the individual quota carrying reps themselves, right? You could do that with a particular leader. Maybe you've got a GM of that product. Maybe you've got people within the product team who have an MBO or a spiff or a bonus tied to the performance of that particular product. So I think there are ways, without necessarily doing at the individual level, to incentivize that product's growth in other parts of your organization. I think this extends beyond just products as well, like any sort of behavior change you're trying to do. I've seen companies before who are trying to go from monthly contracts to annual deals, or annual deals to 3-year deals. Those are products in and of themselves. And so guess what? If you pay more for those 3-year deals, you're going to get more coming in the door, and you pay those at an accelerated rate. I think the only exception I would make, Lynn, to your question is if in the instance you were mentioning about the customer who might be moving to either a services or a subscription, versus if you have different margins on the products that you're selling, that's an instance where you would want to tweak the way you comp or quota that particular product, because if you're paying the exact same amount and the company's making less, then you're eventually going to find yourself upside down. So that's the last thing I would consider.
A good point. Okay. 9 minutes. By the way, Lynn says, thanks so much. And she likes the simplicity of the one rate, adding accelerators for the preferred product. So can we talk more about RevOps considerations for planning with a PLG or product-led growth motion?
The consideration, I think I would say, is be involved, because I've seen a lot of organizations where the PLG motion is entirely outside the scope of kind of what RevOps does, right? And that's sort of dangerous, but because it's entirely driven by the product team, it's engineered into the product, and there's all of that built in. You typically end up with the product team tracking the go-to-market aspects of that, compared to the RevOps teams being focused just on the distribution resources that you have, right? Your sales team, or your CS team, and so on. So if any of those people are not involved in the sales process or in the distribution model, then it's not a RevOps problem, it's a product problem, right? And what that tends to do is you tend to miss the big picture on what you're trying to achieve at the end of the day, right? So for me, the number one consideration is stay involved in that discussion, stay involved in that process, because there's a lot of feedback that the team can provide into that. Because ultimately, we all want a product-led motion, irrespective of how we're selling, because fewer resources to get to the goal that we want is the idea, right? And your ROI is much higher. But it doesn't always work that way. So there is always this balance of how far do you push the PLG motion, and how much does the RevOps or your resources need to support that. I think that's a discussion that RevOps need to be involved in, and sort of support that with feedback.
Yeah, I had a really smart woman named Namrata Ram who came on our operations podcast, and she worked on the ops team at Slack. She's at Notion now. So she's lived and breathed this. And like, there are a couple of things that she taught me that I think are important for folks here. Like the first is, Bala, you started to make this point, like, is your company's product actually the right fit for PLG? Before you just jump right in, because like that's the buzzwordy thing to do, stop and question if that's the right go-to-market motion for your particular product and your particular audience. And then I think another important place where RevOps can get involved that she talked to me about is the moment when you decide whether a human should intervene or not, right? And I think kind of devising the path in your PLG motion to decide, using all the data that's available to you and using the level of intent of the customer and using the complexity of the needs of that customer, when and how does a human get involved? And I think that's the place where RevOps can really plug in, right? If you're in charge of designing the customer journey and the processes and the tools that support that customer journey, identifying where in your PLG motion there is sufficient usage or sufficient intent for a human to then get involved, I think that's the place where, operators can add a lot of value.
what about, and well, I guess not what about, but just to add to this is just like really also the amount of resources, and kind of what goes off in my brain is like, PLG isn't going to be specific around, all of it's going to come from Florida or the United States. So we're going to just pool all these resources here. It's going to come from different places. So RevOps can certainly look at historical data, kind of know where, and if you're collaborating with product on this and marketing, kind of know where maybe some of these the leads or the PLG opportunities are going to come from, and kind of anticipate where the resources need to be and design for that. And I think this motion almost needs, you can't like go down into hyper specific territories, because if you are carving, and let's just say you do it on state by state level in the United States, you're going to have some people with 80 opportunities and one person with one opportunity. And so you almost need to design the go-to-market motion there to anticipate or be flexible with where the leads are coming from and the opportunities are coming from. And so that's certainly another piece.
It's not just the sales side, right? It's also CS perspective, customer support. Like, where are you going to need people to support it, right? Is it in the US, in Europe? Like, where are you expecting? It's important to think through that full distribution cycle as opposed to just one aspect of it, like either sales or CS, right? Because PLG has its limits. It stops somewhere, and then the rest of the organization has to get involved.
Yep.
And I think the other thing too is, you shouldn't be afraid of that scenario, right, Tyler? Like that, if anything, you have more information at your disposal than in any other type of sales motion, outbound, or even, people coming inbound and filling out a form. Like, you have real live data available to you about who these folks are, how they're using it. And then the beauty of that is, in the sales process itself, you can and should leverage the data that's available to you, because it's not a hypothetical, right? It's not even, a business case study at that point. It is a true proof of concept to be able to say, guess what? This is what we're seeing. These are the results thus far. This is the usage. And then all of a sudden you can expand upon this, almost like pilot that you started with. And so take advantage of that. That's a huge leg up in any sort of sales process.
Spot on. Ashley told us not to talk for an hour, but we did. So, but we're gonna wrap up. Ashley, I'm gonna pass it back to you, and you can introduce the next AMA.
Yeah. I guess before I do that, is there any burning thoughts that you guys feel like you haven't touched on that you'd like to share before I move on to promoting the next session? You touched on a lot of great things. That's probably why we went so long. Okay. Fantastic discussion. Thank you all so much for sharing all of that. I will flash up just one little last slide here. Making sure it's the right little last slide. So next week's section, we actually have we have to do a little switcheroo of speakers. So it's a surprise. And as soon as we firm that up in the next day or so, we'll go ahead and share that information as well. But the topic is on coverage. So really talking about what is the coverage model. And I think at this time, everybody, like we've been talking about, every session is trying to do more with less. And so that's an important thing to really think about. How are different people approaching their coverage models to really make the most of what they're working with? So that'll be an exciting one as well. Thank you so much, Sean, for joining us. A lot of great stuff there that you guys were able to talk through. We will get this recording all packaged up and sent out to all of our attendees. So thanks a lot, everybody. We will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.